Welcome to Let's Build. I'm Boaz Zinnemann, and today we are going to focus on securing and protecting your data in the cloud. So Richard deleted some files he should not. And in general, it looks like he needs some help from Mary to protect his data. Define some least privilege access patterns for users based on their exact needs, detect suspicious activities and get alerts on issues, and automatically respond in real time. Let's start with the basics and discuss how Mary can help Richard to prevent file deletion. In this session, we are going to discuss several topics. So we'll start with the basic permissions on AWS. How can you define permissions for users for specific services? Then we're going to talk about Amazon S3 bucket policies and how can you define those permissions on a bucket level. And we will end up with Amazon S3 bucket versioning that will allow you to prevent deletions or revert to a previous version of a file by enabling versions on your bucket. So how do I protect my data in the cloud and specifically on Amazon S3? So there are many ways to do it and many services and options that you can define to control the access to your bucket. We are going to focus on two of them today. We're going to talk about identity and access management, and we're going to talk about bucket policies. There are other tools like access control list, object tags that you can use to prevent or allow access, and of course access points that can allow you to define different access patterns for the same bucket based on usage, based on applications, based on users. So there are many ways to protect your data. We are going to focus on two, as I said, and the question is, when should I use one instead of another? So IAM user policies are the general definitions. This is defining what users or groups can do in AWS in general. It's not specific to S3. You can define specific access to your entire environment. You can control all AWS services and their permissions, and there are no permissions by default. So if you did not define permissions for a user by using an IAM policy, it won't be able to do anything on your platform. So you need to explicitly define permissions for specific users. Then there is the Amazon S3 bucket policy that define who can access and who can do what with a specific S3 resource, and this is on the bucket level. And you basically want to control this very granularly on a specific bucket with specific definitions. You can grant, in this case, access to other accounts from outside your account and not using IAM roles. And buckets are private by default, so this is something you should take into account. If you need to provide access, you need to make sure that you define who can access those buckets in addition to the owner of the data, which always has access by definition. So take this into account. So let's talk about the basic permissions, identity and access management, or in short, IAM. How do I define a policy for IAM? So this is how a basic policy looks like. And it allows you to enable granular access to the different services on AWS, not necessarily S3, as I said before. And I need to define it for a user, a group, define this policy and attach it to user group. By the way, there are predefined policies that you can use. We are going to use some predefined policies in our demos. And when looking at this policy, we're starting with the effect, allow or deny. This is the basic definition. Should I allow something or should I deny something? You should take into account that deny will take preferences on anything else. So if you're defining a deny policy, it will be executed first and stop executing other policies. If something is not working, you should check if you defined a deny policy somewhere. Then we are going to define a principal. This is basically the account that can access this. It can be a user, it can be an account, it can be all users accessing this specific policy. You should define this explicitly. Then we have the action. It could be multiple actions. In this case, in this example, we are allowing get object for S3. S3 is the service, get object is the action. And then we are defining the resource. So we allow the action, but we need to tell to which resource. I can define all resources. I really not recommending doing so. And you should probably define resources explicitly, which user can, which policy or which user or which group can access which resources. So in this case, I'm allowing access to a specific bucket with a specific prefix and to all files in this specific prefix. I can add in addition conditions. This is not mandatory, and conditions can include different things that will be applied on top of all the rest of the definition. So in this case, I'm looking for a specific tag inside my object. In this case, blue. So any file with the tag blue will be part of this policy. I can add other things. I can add the hours of the day for access policies. I can add IP addresses and many, many other things. So let's see how can I improve the setup of Richard's account with IAM users and policies. So I'm in my AWS Management Console. This is my S3 setup. I have one bucket there. This is the bucket with the files that Richard accidentally deleted. It's my business files bucket. As you can see, 4 files. This is what I have there. Some annual financial reports and my budget for next year, and some files for design related stuff. And if I'm going to my IAM management console and looking at my users, I currently have 3 users. Ignore the second one. It's a system user for the system I'm using right now, for the account I'm using right now. I have Boaz and I have Richard. If I'm looking into both users, so going into my account, I can see in permissions that I have an attached policy called administrator access that will give me basically, I can do anything, almost anything in this account. If I'm checking Richard, you're going to see I have exactly the same thing. So if I'm accessing the system using Richard's account, you can see right now I'm using Richard's account in this specific case, and if I'm accessing the system, I'm going to my bucket, and I will try to delete the budget file, for example. So budget 2021, let's delete it, and I need to provide a text permanently delete, just to make sure I know what I'm doing. So this is not accidental deletion. By the way, if I'm doing it with CLI, it won't ask me. So deleting with CLI, in theory, it's simpler. I'm going to do delete object and successfully deleted the object. And now I'm missing another file. Oh, that's not what I wanted. So let's go back for a second to my user definitions. And I'm going to change Richard's permissions. So I'm going to remove the administrative access from Richard. Detach this policy. I can define my own policy, actually write a policy like I showed you before in the slides, but in this case I'm going to attach an existing policy. So let's do add permissions to Richard, and I'm going to attach existing policy directly. I'm going to look for S3 policies, and as you can see, there are several S3 policies. So I have S3 full access, I have some other regarding outposts, so not really relevant, and I have read-only access. So in this case, I would like to give Richard read-only access to this to all S3 buckets. I'm going to do next, review the policy. I can actually look at this. This is a specific policy just to see exactly what does it means. Let me load it. Let's do a JSON format so you can read it. Allow, get, and list on all resources that are related to those actions, in this specific case, S3. So let's finish with this. Let's do add permissions to Richard. Now Richard's account has only Amazon S3 read-only access. Let's switch back to Richard and try to delete another file. This time I'm going to delete the financial report for 2020. I'm going to select the file, I'm going to hit delete. I'm going to provide text once again, and I'm going to do delete objects. And in this case, I'm getting an error. And the error is access denied, as you can see here. And this is because I just changed Richard permissions. So make sure you have your users, make sure you set the right permissions. If I'm going back to my own account using my username, I will be able to delete those files. So this is on the basic IAM setup. And I can do something similar with my Amazon S3 bucket policies, defining a policy on the bucket unrelated to a specific user that will allow or prevent access and operations, actions on a specific bucket. So in this example, I can use this policy, and you should be already familiar with the format. It's more or less the same as IAM policies. And in this case, I would like to allow a principal from another AWS account to read objects from my bucket. And in this specific case, I'm adding a condition that is looking for a specific tag inside the object before it will allow this operation, and in this case we're looking for a tag with X in it, and this will allow or deny this access from this external account. In our case, if you would like to prevent deletions from our bucket, in this case I will deny deletion for all users, including Richard, of course, to delete any objects from this business files bucket. In this case, I'm adding an action of S3 delete objects, and I'm denying it, explicitly denying it from all users. In this case, nobody will be able to delete, and I need to think about if this is a good policy or not. We're going to discuss in the next chapter when talking about versioning, if this is the best way to prevent deletion or not. But this is absolutely possible, and you should take this into account as another tool you have to define permissions. Just to make sure we understand how those permissions are being applied to a specific object or to a specific action. So in this case, access policy processing, we will take all the definitions from IAM policies, the bucket policies, VPC endpoint policies, that's another way to protect your files, and of course the object access control list, and then start looking into those definitions. If there is an explicit defined anywhere in the process, it will be used, and if not, then we are going to look for allow rules and basically see if we can allow this operation or not. If a rule is not defined, obviously we won't allow any operation. So let's see, how do we define bucket policies for our bucket? So I'm back in my own account. Richard won't be able to do that. He won't be able to change permissions for those buckets because he has only read access to S3 buckets. And now I would like to add a bucket policy for my bucket. So going to permissions, you will see all the different options of defining permissions for your buckets. So you can see that the buckets and objects are not public because I have block on all public access. I can edit it, of course. This is my definition of bucket policy. We're going to add a definition in a second. I can change ownership. I can work with access control list that I mentioned earlier, and I can do cross-origin resource sharing. In this case, I would like to define a bucket policy. So I'm going to hit edit, and I'm going to add a policy, and I have policy examples and policy generators that will help you to define your own policies. But in our case, I would like to add a policy that I already wrote in advance. So this is my policy, and in this case, I'm going to do a deny policy for everybody to delete objects on this specific bucket and all its files. This is a very problematic policy, but I just want to put it there to make a point. And in this case, you won't be able to delete files, to delete objects, in this case, from this bucket, no matter what are your permissions in other places. To prove that, I'm going to save this policy. I'm going to save changes. I'm in my account, which has administrative access to everything on my specific account. And I'm going to go to objects and try to delete them. I'm going to try to delete the annual financial report. So let's try to delete it. I need to provide permanently delete. And although I have administrative access to this account, because of the bucket policy, once again, I'm getting fail to delete, and I'm going to get access denied because of this specific bucket policy. So now, after we finished with permission, let's see how can we prevent deletion using Amazon S3 bucket versioning. So versioning is something you need to define on your bucket. As soon as you define versioning, every file you're going to upload and upload again or delete is going to keep all its versions inside your bucket. So if you're uploading a file with a new version, you're starting with version A, so there is a pointer for this specific version. You're adding another one, there is going to be another version, and you can always go back to the previous one. You can open it and you can see it. I'm going to show you in a second in the demo how exactly it's being done. When you delete a file, you're actually not deleting it. And in this case, when we're deleting a file without specifying a version ID, in that case, this version is going to be actually deleted. But a normal delete operation will just add a delete marker to your file. And at any given time, you can delete this delete marker and revert the file. So this is a logical definition inside your bucket that will tell the system not to show you the file and return a 404 error in case somebody asks for it, but the file is actually there, and all you need to do to restore it is to delete this delete marker. By the way, if you're deleting a file with a specific ID, a version ID, it will be actually deleted and there is no way to restore it. So let's enable this versioning on our bucket and see how it works. So to define versioning, you need to access the properties section inside your bucket and scroll down to bucket versioning. A very important thing to remember that as soon as you enabled versioning, you won't be able to disable it. You can stop collecting new versions, but old versions won't be deleted. You need to delete them manually, explicitly with defining a version ID. And as soon as I enable it, this bucket will be able to go to an unversioned state, but not to a disabled state anymore. So let's edit it and enable versioning. And let's save changes. So at this point, nothing new happened in my bucket because I have no previous versions. I can turn on list versioning, but the same as before. So in that case, let's take one of the files we have here, the food blog design PNG. This is a very basic PNG file that has a design for my blog. I would like to change colors a bit for this one. So I'm going to go to tools and adjust colors, just change a bit the colors of the page. So it will be different than the previous one. And I'm going to save this new version. So now I want to upload this new version to my bucket. So let me just drag it and save it to the bucket. I'm uploading the file. It'll take a few seconds. And I'm done. So now if I do list versions, in this case, I'm going to see that I have two versions of my food blog design PNG. One is from April 25th at 11, and this one is from 2 p.m., 1400. And I can actually go to each one of the files, download the previous version, and even revert. So that gives me a full history for a specific file if I want to go back to the previous version. Now let's put back the budget file that I deleted previously. I have a local copy, so I'm just going to re-upload it. Okay, so the file is back now. You can see the budget file is here. And now if I'm deleting this file, I need to type delete. As you can see, it's shorter because I'm not really deleting it. I'm going to do delete object, and going back to my bucket, you'll see that it's missing from here. But if I'm going to hit the list versions, you're going to see that I have the budget 2021 file. I have the original one and I have the delete marker. So I can go to the original file, I can download it, it's still there. And if I want to put this file back, all I need to do is to delete the delete marker. In the case I'm keeping the delete marker, each time I'm going to send a request to get the object without specifying this specific version ID, I'm going to get a 404 error because the file is not there, it's just a delete marker. If I'm removing the delete marker, I'm going to get the actual file. By the way, let's remove it for a second, and I'm going to show you one more thing. So I'm deleting the delete marker. This is permanently delete, so I can't restore the marker. I need to know that. Closing. And as you can see, the file is back here. By the way, if I'm in version mode and I'm choosing a specific version, like for example, if I'm going to delete this file, the annual financial report, it won't I won't be able to restore it. There will be no delete marker because I'm deleting a specific version. In this case, the version ID is null, but it doesn't really matter. So remember that before deleting files. So great. We really helped Richard to set the permissions, the right security on his bucket, and to prevent deletion by using versioning. Just to recap, how do you protect your data on Amazon S3? So first of all, separate your users. Make sure you define the IAM policies for each user using the least privilege concepts. Just give them the permission they need. Define bucket policies for things you would like to enforce on the bucket level, and enable bucket versioning just to make sure that files that are deleted can be restored easily. In the next episode of this series, we will discuss how to detect suspicious activities and automatically respond in real time. Thank you very much for watching. Enjoy the rest of the series and see you next time.
Well, hello there, you amazing tech people, you. Listen, thank you so much for stopping by to check out this video. However, there is so much more great content out there to be found, so make sure to subscribe to the Build on AWS YouTube channel, and while you're at it, click that bell icon to be notified about the latest and greatest in videos made by builders for